are the various prerequisites we have already seen in our last lecture, right? I have some question in my mind. Let me ask those questions to you all first. So one by one, I am going to ask some questions. Based on that, can anyone uh, let Mohammad Rekal? Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Uh, First question to you: what is XML? A short means one to line, maybe one or two line description. What is
Sir,
XML?
it is a self-descriptive language and we can create the tags on our own.
Okay. Nirmal Chandra,
Yes, sir.
why we have used XML only? Why not other language?
Because in XML we can define our own tags, but if we have used any other language which are vendor specific, then we have to use their predefined tags. And these user defined tags are useful for the developers because they can define according to themselves that how to what should be the contents of the message. They can define by themselves.
Okay. So mainly there are two reasons why they have chosen XML. First thing, XML can be XML can be transported easily using HTTP, and in XML the developers are allowed to add new tags, right? So what they have thought, so XML is a open standard language, right? So any vendor must have supported must have been supporting XML. So they have chosen XML. So based on that XML, they have created a new language, that is SOAP, right? Because we can in XML the developers are allowed to create new tags. So it is even possible you can create your own language, right? Using XML, you can create, let's say Mahendra Sharma wants to create its own language, let's say Mahendra, right? So using XML, you can define your own language. Using XML, you can define like HTML type of kind of thing also. So they defined SOAP based language, XML based language, which is SOAP, for the communication purpose between the two web services. So Rahul Sahu, can you explain what are the different technologies available for the SOA implementation? Anyone? Rakesh Kumar, Ranveer Singh, anyone? What are the different technologies available to implement SOA?
Sir, REST and SOAP technology, these two.
Okay. Okay, these are the two web service technology. Except these web service technology, what are the others?
Sir, Corba. Sir, Corba is there. It is one. Others are RPC also, remote procedure calls.
Okay. There were many technologies which were used to develop SOA application. Which one was Corba application, one was DCOM model, and Java. In Java we have what was that? RPC, RMI method, right? So there are different technologies which are already being used to development of SOA. So why in those technology set we are not using XML? Can anyone explain why we are not using XML in those kind of implementation of SOA? Why we are not using XML in DCOM? Why we are not using XML in RMI technique of for the implementation of SOA? Why we are using XML only in web services? Anyone?
Sir, in that we were not transporting data means cross platform. We were means transporting data in the same technology.
Right. So the major reason of using the XML to incorporate the interoperability, right? So before before there were different kind of technologies available to implement the SOA. First one was DCOM and the RMI method and the RPC style. These all the technology set which can be used to develop the SOA application, but that SOA application were not interoperable. To implement the SOA as a service which can be interoperable, so a new technology set comes into picture, which is web services kind of thing, right? So due to introduction of this web services kind of thing, we are using XML, because all the different kinds of vendors, they are whether it is C# or Python or Java, any kind of programming language, XML is supported by each one of them, because XML is an open standard, right? So how the XML message can be transported from one client to another client, one machine to another machine? Anyone?
Sir, we can add headers in front of those XML message that route that message to the particular machine.
No, for the transportation
API,
purpose.
sir.
So for the transportation purpose, we are using only the HTTP. Then why we are using headers in the XML message? Why we are using headers? Anyone?
Sir, for locating a particular machine within the route?
To make that message intelligence savvy, right? To make that message intelligence savvy, so that in the path there is no need to what the different kinds of system has to do with that message, right? So till this point we have already discussed in our previous lecture. So moving to our next slide. Let me share my screen first. Okay, so in the last class we have already discussed about these web services. What are these web services? You already know about these web services till this point of time. So UDDI simply stands for Universal Description, Discovery and the Integration. Why we are using this UDDI? It's a these are all the theoretical concepts. In the practical world, these are known as software repository, where we publish our WSDL file, right? So suppose you created let's say 100 of web services. You are not going to mail that WSDL file obtained by creating your web services to the consumer, right? So you need a software repository where you can publish that WSDL file, right? So these are this software repository in SOA concepts, in theoretical SOA concept, it is called UDDI, Universal Descriptive Discovery and the Integration, right? Okay, so if we talk about the contemporary primitive SOA, this is the architecture of primitive SOA, the basic architecture of a SOA. So suppose you want to create a smallest project in SOA, that project should be known as a SOA project. For that purpose, what we need at least one service provider, and we need at least one service requester, and we need at least one service registry, right? where we could publish our WSDL file. We can see here we need at least one service provider and at least one service requester, and we need to publish this WSDL file of this service into our service registry. Then this is called at smallest SOA project. But in this in contemporary SOA, how this basic architecture converted into contemporary architecture? We have a middleware. We have a middleware here, and this middleware it's connected to service requester, service provider, and the service registry. And this middleware is also developed using the SOA principles, right? So overall, it becomes the SOA architecture. This is called primitive SOA. Contemporary SOA. So it is not given in this book, the contemporary architecture of SOA. They have already given this basic architecture only. So for the contemporary part, the earlier model was the simple WS model, means the web service model was not that much efficient, right? So our goal was to elevate this web service technology to enterprise level. So what open we have different groups of WS3C and W3C and Oasis. These are all groups which already which works in this section of developing some kind of means new kind of technology. They are already working on to develop a new kind of technology. So what they did, they come up with WS star. W dash star means they come up with various kind of extension of web services so that it can go up to the level of enterprise level. So WS star could be used to develop enterprise level SOA based architecture, right? So one of the WS star is WSBPL. What is that? It stands for Web Service Business Process Execution Language, right? We are going to see this in our labs, in tomorrow's lab maybe. So
कल क्या पढ़ाओगे अमर?
सर अभिषेक सर
कल लैब में, हाँ अभिषेक हाँ अब तुमको अमर हमेशा। मैं अमर की एक कहानी अभी बताऊंगा, बहुत दुख की कहानी है। एनीवे 5 मिनट ब्रेक, थोड़ा अमर की कहानी थोड़ा बता रहा हूँ। एक लड़का मेरे पास एमटेक कर ही रहा था, उसका नाम था अमरनाथ। वो 2012 से 2014 देन वो बहुत अच्छा क्लास में फर्स्ट होता था, टर्निंग फर्स्ट। देन उसका घर है नॉर्थ यूपी उत्तराखंड की बाजू, तो उसको मिल गया आईआईटी रुड़की में पीएचडी में। वो आईआईटी रुड़की में पीएचडी में ज्वाइन कर लिया। वही मेरे को प्रेशर डाल के, सर ये सर क्लाउड का फंडामेंटल बेसिक आर्किटेक्चर है सर, इसको आप पढ़ाओ। मेरे को प्रेशर डाला। तो 2014 जनवरी से हम लोग ये पढ़ा रहे हैं। वही एक एमटेक स्टूडेंट, इतना वो पढ़ाई इंटरेस्टेड था और क्लाउड की नॉलेज डेवलप करने के लिए वो मेरे को प्रेशर डाला। और 2014 जनवरी से हम लोग एनआईटी राउरकेला में ये ऑफर कर ही रहे हैं। 2014 जनवरी, अभी 2021 जनवरी होने को जा रहा है, 7 साल हो गया। ये एक वन साइड ऑफ द फैक्ट है। देन वो आईआईटी रुड़की से पीएचडी किया। पीएचडी करने के बाद कुछ दिन इधर उधर जॉब किया, उसका बाद ही गॉट अ गुड जॉब इन एक अच्छी कॉलेज है, संत लंगवाल इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी, गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया, एनआईटी की तरह एसएलआईटी लंगवाल, उस जगह की नाम है लंगवाल। लड़का बहुत अच्छा था, मेरा साथ काफी कांटेक्ट रखता था, बहुत अच्छा लड़का है, काफी रिसर्च ओरिएंटेड था। तो रिसेंटली क्या हुआ, उसको छू करने में कुछ प्रॉब्लम आई। तो उन्होंने कुछ गांव में जैसे लोकल लोग कुछ एडवाइस करते हैं, कुछ होम्योपैथी एडवाइस करते हैं, कुछ आयुर्वेदिक एडवाइस करते हैं। तो उन्होंने गांव में कुछ एडवाइस किए, आयुर्वेदिक मेडिसिन उन्होंने ले ली। आयुर्वेदिक मेडिसिन 3 महीना लिया। तो 3 महीना आयुर्वेदिक मेडिसिन लेने का बाद इतना हालत खराब हो गया है। एक दिन वो अभी फिलहाल लंगवाल, जगह की नाम है लंगवाल, एसएलआईटी इंस्टीट्यूट है, संत लंगवाल इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी, सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट की एक इंस्टीट्यूट है, वहां पर फैकल्टी है कंप्यूटर साइंस में। लास्ट संडे को वो बेहोश हो गया रात को। उसका हॉस्पिटल उन लोग लेके गए, वहां पर लॉन्ग थोड़ा बाजू में एक 30 किलोमीटर दूर में एक जगह है, उस जगह की नाम है संगरूर। संगरूर में उसको एडमिट किए, सडनली वो बेहोश हो गया। तो काफी उसको ट्रीटमेंट किए और देखे कि किडनी इज टोटली डैमेज्ड, किडनी। देन उसको डायलिसिस वगैरह किए हैं, अभी शायद 2 महीना उसको ट्रीटमेंट डायलिसिस में रखेंगे। उसका बाद उसको मैं एडवाइस किया हूँ, बाबू तुम पीजीआई चंडीगढ़ में दिखाओ, संगरूर में कितना अच्छा एक्सपर्ट मिलेंगे कि नहीं पता नहीं, तुम 3-4 घंटा दूर है, संगरूर से जाओ, पीजीआई चंडीगढ़ अच्छी कॉलेज है, वहां पर दिखाओ। मैं भी कुछ कांटेक्ट है मेरी, तो मैं उसका एडवाइस किया हूँ। मेरी ये कहने का तात्पर्य है, सच ए गुड बॉय एंड ही इज ए फैकल्टी इन SLIT लंगवाल। उन्होंने कितना गलती कर ली, हाउ मच मिस्टेक ही हैज डन बाय टेकिंग आयुर्वेदिक, रॉन्ग आयुर्वेदिक मेडिसिन which has some wrong impact on the body and the kidney got affected. So my dear children, it's a big lesson for you. Don't go to any sort of wrong doctor. He had gone to a Ayurvedic doctor for getting better treatment. He had some urination problem. Instead of getting better treatment, his kidney got totally damaged and he is under dialysis now. ये लास्ट संडे की कहानी है, 5 दिन से वो संगरूर में था, आज डिस्चार्ज हुआ है। मैंने ये 100 सब्जेक्ट का साथ उसका एक अच्छी सी कनेक्शन है। उन्होंने मेरे को प्रेशर डाल के सब्जेक्ट पढ़ाने के लिए मजबूर किया था और उसी दिन से 2014 जनवरी से ये पढ़ाई हो ही रही है। एनीवे, दिस इज द लिटिल बिट ब्रेक इन बिटवीन एंड इज ए बिग लेसन टू यू ऑल that don't go to a wrong doctor, whether he is Ayurvedic or whether he is allopathy, and they create more problem than helping you. Big lesson. And this SWA subject is associated with him. He is Dr. Amarnath. You can check his profile. He is in SLIT लोंगवाल, जो कि पंजाब की नॉर्थ एरिया में है, देख लेना लोंगवाल में। एंड ही इज इन रियल ट्रबल बिकॉज ही वेंट टू ए रॉन्ग डॉक्टर, an Ayurvedic doctor. Anyway, this was a small information and I am so shocked that he was my very favorite student. आज यहाँ से 7 साल से पास करके गया, लेकिन अभी हमेशा कांटेक्ट रखता था. He used to keep very much contact with me and I am really shocked about his kidney problem. His kidney is totally affected. Anyway, चलो पढ़ाई करो. ओके चलो अभिषेक, चलो अभिषेक, तुम्हारी खांसी हो रहा है, तुम गर्गल करता नहीं है, गर्गल करो रात से, खांसी ठीक आदत नहीं है, वो दूसरा प्रॉब्लम को बढ़ावा करता है. ओके
यस सर.
हाँ, गर्म पानी में कुलकुला इस तरह का गर्गल करो. मैं सुनता हूँ गर्गलिंग करने से, तुम्हारा खांसी सुनता हूँ गर्गलिंग करने से ठीक हो जाएगा, नमक डाल के. टेक केयर ऑफ योर हेल्थ ठंडी का दिन में. ओके
Yes.
चलो बेटे चलो. ओके.
So retrofitting issues while SWA reshaping XML and the web services. The first point is the data representation and the service modeling standards must be aligned. So you need to model your services based in a way that it must be aligned with the data representation. These all lines, these all the sentences or all these points you may use in your project while you developing your project, right? So SOAP is used for all inter-service communication. XML documents and the XSD schemas are modeled with SOAP in mind. These all points have already been discussed. Now the document style messaging is the standard and changing RPC style imposes changes on service. What is document style messaging? We will going to see in our maybe in lab, right? We have a long discussion over what is document style messaging and what is one another name is document style, and one was what was it? There are two style of messaging. We will see what is the document style messaging, and another one is I am forgetting the name. And the SOAP promotes content and the intelligence heavy message model. This support statelessness, autonomy, and minimizes message sending, right? So this line already clear to all, because we have already seen why we have added so much of headers in XML message to convert that XML message into SOAP message. That's why, because after getting added after adding different headers, it becomes intelligence heavy. And why we are focusing on intelligence heavy messaging model? Because SOA principle says your SOA project, the SOA services must be statelessness. It should be autonomous in nature, and it should minimizes the message sending, right? So what are the different organization contributing to the SOA? The very first one is the World Wide Web Consortium. It also started supporting or contributing to SOA. How it started supporting to or contributing to SOA? It has developed XML schema, XSLT, the SOAP message itself, and the WSDL and the web services. These all the prerequisites to develop a SOA implementation using these web services. These all prerequisites are developed by W3C, right? So in the same way, Oasis started contributing to the SOA. How it started contributing SOA? It started with started supporting with for contemporary SOA, right? How it started is it has developed WSDL, BPL, EBXML, and UDDI, SAML, and the XSEML, right? These all are the WS star. We will go through this in our coming chapters. So this is how the different open standards, open organization had started supporting or contributing to the SOA. So one more organization is the Web Service Interoperability Organization, that is WSI, right? So how it started supporting or contributing to SOA? It has developed basic security profile, BP1 or BP2, BP1 and BP2, and positions specific versions. Means the WSDL file or the structure of WSDL has already been developed by W3C, but it had come up with new versions. Like we have now WSDL 1.2. We have now SOAP 1.2. We have UDDI versions, different versions. We have different versions of XML, and we have different versions of XML schema. How these versions are supported or contributed to SOA by Web Service Interoperability Organization, right? And some major vendors also started supporting SOA. The Microsoft, whether it is Microsoft, IBM, BES Systems, Sun Microsystems, Oracle, HP, Canon, Commerce, right? So these are the major vendors that started supporting SOA, and they all started supporting SOA in their own style. For Microsoft, the SOA design is different one. For the IBM, the SOA design was different one. So they all started supporting SOA in a different manner, right? So each vendor has its own vision for SOA. IBM started using WebSphere. It is a web server of IBM. Sorry. Similarly, Microsoft supports .NET and its operating system. And these vendors try to influence decision using their proprietary designs. So these all are common things. Let's start with this roots of SOA. Why do we need SOA actually? Anyone wants to explain why do we need SOA, and what will be the roots, or what would have been the roots of that SOA? Anyone? Any guess?
Sir, interoperability requirements, like because different services need to be required in different programming languages. So to provide that, I mean to remove the dependency among the services. That's why.
Okay, so if we take evolution of software web application development, so whether it is desktop application or a web application development, it has been started from one tier application, it goes to two tier application.
Sir, you are muted. Hello. Sir. Muted, sir.
अम्मा ये अभिषेक,
Yes sir.
म्यूट हो गया तुम्हारी।
Yes.
हाँ देख लो। करो चलो।
So can anyone explain with one or two point what is the difference between three tier architecture and n tier architecture? And what is SOA? SOA is a three tier architecture or multi tier architecture? Anyone? And what are the different frameworks for multi-tier architecture? Sorry, three-tier architecture. Any existed means a standard framework for developing three-tier architecture. Have you heard of MVC? Anyone? Model View Controller.
Yes, sir.
Yes, they have read it. They have read it in software
Okay.
architecture. They have read it.
So we have started with one tier application. That one tier application is known as desktop application, right? So we have started with one tier application, then we have moved to two tier application, and then we have moved to three tier application. That three tier all the means these tier architectures have come up with some standard frameworks to develop that application. So three tier architecture come up with a new framework to develop any three tier architecture, that is MVC, right? So if we move from three tier to multi tier architecture, let's say n tier architecture, and you want to develop a multi tier architecture, we don't have any in the 90s we were not having any standard framework to develop multi-tier application. Means let's say Mahendra wants to develop a multi-tier application, he is following his ways, and if I want to develop multi-tier application, I am following my ways, right? So there were no standards being followed. So SOA comes into picture to provide that framework to implement a multi-tier architecture. Means they provided some principle, you should go this way, you should not go this way. There are some do's and don'ts to develop a multi-tier application. So the roots of SOA comes into picture with the rise of multi-tier application. Everyone got this point?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So in three tier architecture, the tier here defines the number of machines involved in processing, right? So in three tier architecture, we have three machines. One having the database server installed, one having the web server installed, and one having the client installed, right? So in n tier application or multi-tier application, let's say we have 5-tier application, and if you want to develop 5-tier application, that is our requirement. We need to develop that 5-tier application. So in one machine there could be like client, and in another machine we have web server, in other application server, in other machine we have database server, in other machine we have a cache, right? In other machine we have a let's say machine learning model working, machine learning model serving to for your application, right? So these are we can say this is a 5-tier application. So there could be a lots of tiers you can build into your application. So in context of IT, if we talk about IT sector, we have SOA in pictures. But if we talk about the let's say in business, we have two different kinds of architecture. One is enterprise architecture, right? So the SOA always aligns with the business, because in enterprises or in any business, the change is very important, right? Every morning there is some changes, and that changes must reflect in your application. So the change is very important in any businesses. So developers or architects want any sort of architecture that could manage change very easily. So they come up with a SOA architecture, and the latest development, the new derivation of this SOA architecture is microservices architecture, right? So what is application architecture? An application architecture is a blueprint. It is simple. These are all only the surface meaning. You can read yourself. An application architecture is simple, a blueprint. Different levels can be specified depending on the organization. Some keep it high level and providing abstract details only, and some keep it too much concrete, providing the physical and the logical representation of the technical blueprint also, right? So some may include the data models, the communication flow diagrams, and the security requirements, and different aspects of their infrastructure. In the similar fashion, we have enterprise architecture. Enterprise architecture similarly provides high-level views of your high-level views of all forms of heterogeneity. This is like if you are trying to plan for urban plan for a city, you need a blueprint, right? So that blueprint is known as enterprise architecture for that urban plan for a city. Similarly, if we want to develop a huge software for enterprise, like you must have visited the Microsoft website. It is a enterprise website. So all their services can be accessed from a single website. If you have visited the Oracle website, all their services could be accessed through single portal. That kind of services, that kind of web application, that multi-tier web application can be developed using SOA. So we have now service-oriented architecture. The service-oriented architecture spans both to enterprise to application architecture domains, and we have already seen these things. Anyone wants to explain this point? What is difference between SOA and client server? Already discussed few minutes back. Anyone?
So client server is a two-tier architecture where SOA allows.
This client server is not necessarily to be two-tier architecture. It could be multi-tier architecture too.
Sir?
Yeah.
In SOA, every system is an autonomous unit, whereas in client server, there is one client who needs to take information from the server, sir. I mean, in SOA, each unit is its own autonomous.
In client server architecture, only the client is dependent on the server, right? And all the units, whether it is you are using cache or using machine learning models for your let's say you have designed a website for weather application, right? Weather forecasting application. So you need four things here, at least four things here. One is client to view your results, and the second one is application server. The third one is database server, or one may be for, let's say, using the machine learning models, or for storing the GPS kind of thing. That kind of information to extract information from the Google Maps or any kind of weather service APIs, right? So we need at least four tier here, right? So that is the difference between the SOA and the client server. In general, any environment in which one piece of software request and receive information from one another, that can be referred as client server, right? So one is a requester here and one is a server here, right? So these are the basic characteristics of client server. You already know this. Bulk of the application logic resides with the client. Business rules were maintained in stored position and triggers on the databases. You already know these points. Okay, so we have single tier client server architecture. Is it possible to have client server, or it is also single tier? Anyone? Is it possible to have a client server architecture and it is also single tier too?
So like peer to peer?
No. That is another kind of architecture. We have different kinds of architecture. That is, one of them is client server, one of them is peer-to-peer, one has the backbone architecture, blackboard architecture. Different kinds of architecture are there, and they support different kinds of application. Suppose you want to develop a application. That application, let's say you want to develop a IoT kind of thing, right? So IoT kind of thing is best suitable by different kind of architecture. Let's say that is being usually done. The IoT kind of architecture is usually performed using blackboard kind of architecture, right? So each and architecture has different use cases. This is different one from the peer-to-peer architecture. So client server architecture, how it is possible to have a client server architecture, and even then it is a single tier. Single tier means using the single machine. How it is possible?
Sir, it is like one computer is having a printer service attached to it, and I want to access that. So, like in CyberCafe, sir.
What is meant by server? Is it necessary to have a complete set of software as a server? Means if you want to, server simply means those which can provide you service, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So don't compare the server as with a let's say any software. Suppose anyone may have used PHP, right? In the last lecture we have some discussion over the PHP. So in PHP we have JAMP server or LAMP server or sorry, WAMP server, right? So we have a software there to install in your system. Then your system will behave as a server. So it is not necessary to install a software to become a server, right? Your file system could be behave as a server. So if you are using Notepad and the file system provides you the text file to open that file in your Notepad application, that is also called single tier client server architecture. Everyone?
Yes.
Because file system gives you the access to call the whatever the file system has, you can view from using the system call, right? And these calls are two kind of calls. Maybe there could be two kinds of client to server calling, right? One is asynchronous calling and second one is synchronous calling. In the message exchange pattern in maybe in chapter number maybe in 5, right? We have a different kinds of messaging patterns. We will go through that, what is asynchronous and what is synchronous kind of messaging patterns in that chapter in very much detail, right? So a typical two-tier client application architecture. See one thing here. In that case, the Notepad application must be a thin client, no application logic must be there, and the minimal processing charge. And the file system that behaves as a server must have an intelligent one, and all application logic reside in that server part, and it has bulk of processing, right? So any typical example for two-tier client server architecture?
Mail, sir.
Sorry?
Mail service.
Browsers.
Means two-tier. What here two-tier means? Two-tier means there must be two machines running side by side, right? See, the presentation and the business logic resides in one machine, and the database resides in another machine, right? So yeah, you can take this mail service as the presentation part and the business logic. If you create a simple mail service, then it could be two-tier client server architecture, because we are only saving the mails over the database, and the presentation part means how the let's say we have a compose button. Where could be the compose button? That compose button may be present here and the here. That the presentation. And the business logic means if you want to delete, that the business logic means the JavaScript part. If you are using the browser itself, then the JavaScript part resides in the client part only. So in that case, it could be two-tier client-server architecture. Everyone got this point or not?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
These all are the simple things. Client server versus the SOA application technology. What are the different technology sets which are available or which are applicable for client server, and what are the different technology set available for the SOA? Anyone? How you can develop a client server application and how you can develop SOA application, SOA project. What are the different technology sets which will help you to develop a client server application, and what are the different technology sets which will help you to create a SOA project? So if you take if you are talking about only client server application, there are many fourth generation languages, right? So fourth generation languages like VB and the Power Builder and the RDBMS. So these are all set which are client server application. But if we take SOA project into consideration, then this SOA technology set has expanded to include web technologies also, HTML, CSS, and HTTP we can use here. So SOA requires the use of XML data representation architecture along with the SOAP messaging format. We already discussed this point. Now, the client server versus SOA application security. If we talk about the security part over the client server in SOA application, sorry. So at the level of if you are talking about only security part, then client server it has centralized at the server level, right? So databases manages user in client server. Data centralized at server level, databases manages user accounts and the groups, and also controlled within the client executable. These are all the simple things you can read yourself. It's not like multiple technology are required, many so these are all the simple things. And we have significant maintenance cost is there. Each client housed application code. These are all theoretical points. Please go through these slides. Same thing, comparison of client server and SOA application in terms of administration, right? This is multi-tier client server architecture. So what is multi-tier here? Multi-tier describes how many machines you have for your application, right? So we could have four machines running, we could have 5 machines running, we could have 7 machines running, we could have many machines, right? So that is simply it is known as multi-tier client server architecture. So here is the main difference. What is the SOA and the traditional distributed internet architecture? So in traditional distributed internet architecture, what are the different implementation technology sets? We have CORBA, DCOM, and RPC. Where is the RPC here? Yeah. So we have RPC, CORBA, and the DCOM model. But multi-tier client application environment began incorporating shifted. Already discussed these points. Nothing new in these points. You know the difference between SOA and the traditional internet architecture? Anyone?
No, sir.
SOA means we are using the web services, and in the traditional distributed internet architecture, all the services must be developed in a single language that we are talking about earlier. Earlier we have discussed why the CORBA is not sufficient to develop the SOA application, why DCOM model is not sufficient to develop a SOA application, because this DCOM model is using only the C#. Similarly, this RMI method only using the Java language. So they are also developing this SOA application. That SOA application is known as traditional distributed internet architecture, right? So the new name comes into picture, that is SOA, if we are using the web services, right? If you are using the REST services and the SOAP services, then the traditional distributed internet architecture is known as SOA. Everyone?
Yes, sir.
These things already have discussed in lab 1. So these are some points on distribute, same thing, both having the same thing, but in SOA we have SOAP messaging. In the traditional DCOM internet architecture model, we have RPC for the calling of different services, right? In SOA we have SOAP message to invoke a particular service, right? So this is the architecture for distributed internet architecture. See the difference. SOA versus traditional distributed internet architecture. Difference lies in the principles. Both having the same thing, but in SOA we have using the SOAP for interoperability purpose, and in traditional distributed internet architecture there is no any concept of interoperability, right? So difference lies in the principles only used to determine the three primary design considerations. Traditional systems create components that reside in one or more application servers, component having various degree of functional granularity, and components on the same server communicate via properties API. So if you are using C#, so different services like means you have developed two services, and if they want to communicate, they must use their proprietary API. But in case of SOA, different components can communicate using SOAP messaging framework that is developed by that is an open standards, right? But if you are using traditional distributed internet architecture and you are using DCOM, then you must use that what is the API name? DCOM model for DCOM model APIs to communicate between two components, right? So in case of SOA, we are the different units of logic is known as service. In case of traditional distributed internet architecture, the different units of logic is known as components, right? So RPC protocols used across servers via proxy and stubs. Please go through these points. These all are simple points. Okay. So I've already discussed in case of SOA we have services. In traditional distributed internet architecture we have components. So in case of SOA also relies on the components, but in SOA concept, service encapsulates the components, right? So these components become the service in case of SOA, and in traditional distributed internet architecture, that same services is known as components. There means different terminologies are followed by different architecture styles, but they are talking about the same thing. So in case of SOA, the functionality is wrapped in services. In our lab 1, we have talked about what is in simple terms what is service. Service is a simple of function. So function needs to be wrapped in function needs to be encapsulated in some using some API so that it can be used as a service, right? So functionality is exposed via open standard interfaces irrespective of technology, providing the solution. So we have talked about how a simple function can behave as a service. That function needs to be exposed via open standard interface. It is talking about the REST and the SOAP service, right? So that is the standard interface. So using this SOAP technology and this REST technology, simple function can be exposed as a service, right? So service exchange information via the SOAP messages, and this SOAP message, we have two kind of messaging style. That is, one is RPC style, and the second one is document style messaging. So these services exchanges information via the SOAP messages. So most applications rely on this document style messaging. We will go through this RPC style and this document style messaging in very much detail in our lab. So don't worry if you are not understanding this RPC system. What is RPC style messaging? What is document style messaging? So in case of SOA, messages are structured to be self-sufficient. What this point is stating? It is simply saying that SOAP messages are having enough headers that it not required any extra information, so that it becomes intelligence heavy, right? So messages are structured to be self-sufficient. Message contain enough meta information, processing instruction, and the policy rules. So it becomes intelligence heavy and it becomes autonomous in nature, right? So SOA uses deep level concept of promoting solution agnostic services. We have already talked about what is the meaning of agnostics. So in case of traditional internet architecture, what is the application processing logic consist of? So in case of traditional distributed internet architecture, the application logic build of DCOM and the CORBA, and SOA relies same thing repeating again and again. We have already talked about these things. So in case of SOA, message uses serialization, transmission, deserialization of SOAP message containing XML payloads. Anyone wants to explain this point? What is serialization, transmission, and deserialization?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. What happens, sir, whenever a file is accessed by a program, then the character stream is used for reading the file. So whenever we write like serialize means serialize the file according to Java. I am talking about Java.
Yeah.
So in that character stream is fetched like file input, file output. Reader is reader access the character stream.
What is serialization represent here?
Sir, where, sir?
Sorry?
Where you are talking, sir?
No. In context of this SOAP messages, what is serialization wants to communicate?
Yes, sir. Serialization means, sir, like whenever we are sending the files, like the character stream of files will be sent, and in the form of object only. And whenever the client, yes, sir.
See, in case of SOAP messages, this serialization. Anyone?
Yes, sir. You go ahead.
So in case of SOAP messages, this realization means you have, suppose you have written two services. One is written using Java and one is written using C#. So if you want to communicate using SOAP messages, what you will do? You create a class and you want to invoke a function running in another machine. So you simply write a XML message, that is SOAP message, XML based SOAP message, and you want to deserialize it. It means serialize it. What is serialization here? You want to convert your object details into XML and you transmit. I have already talked about this point. Suppose this so you have object here, object written in Java, and you have object written in C#. So this object detail in XML first, and then uses HTTP, and then again this XML here converted into, right? So this is serialization and deserialization, and this is transmission, that is HTTP, converting XML to Java object and Java to XML to C# object. Got this point?
Sir, means you are saying like whenever we are doing serialization, the C# object or whatever the object means in whatever language it is present.
I got your point also. You are you are trying to explain this serialization in context of Java.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, I know that point. So
can you explain once again, sir?
See, in Java, we are using that serialization API for changing that XML into one object. So suppose Java object into XML, right? It is related to that streaming part also, I know. So RPC communication is faster than SOAP and SOAP processing over it. Anyone wants to explain this RPC communication is faster than SOAP? How? How RPC communication? RPC means you are simply calling a function which is running in another machine. And in case of SOAP, you are not directly invoking that function running in another machine. You need to convert first and then transmit first and then back to your original form. Then you can call that function. So in case of SOAP, there is a processing overhead. But in case of RPC, we do not require to convert one object to another object because both are written in the same language. So in case of RPC communication, it is faster than SOAP, and in case of SOAP, we require extra processing to convert that one object written in means object written in one language into another language. So there is a extra overhead, that is why SOAP is slow. That is the main reason REST comes into picture, because SOAP was slow. In case of REST, we do not require any conversion. We actually require this conversion, but we do not require any validation at this end. We go through that point also when we cover REST and SOAP in our lab classes. What are the various differences between them? We also going to cover that.
Sir, excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
One thing can happen, sir, like RPC is for distributed systems communication, and SOAP is for like client to server. So it can impact like the communication faster or slower.
See, we have already talked about RPC communication is only for traditional distributed internet architecture. Suppose you have developed a service-oriented architecture and all the services are written in single language. Got it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And you want you have created that SOA architecture, right? And you also you parallelly develop a traditional distributed internet architecture using the same language. In SOA, you are using all the services written in same language, and in traditional distributed internet architecture, you are using again the same language. But in case of SOA, you are using SOAP message. In case of traditional internet architecture, you are using the RPC calling, right? So if you compare this project, your both projects are same. One is developed using SOA and the second one is developed using traditional distributed internet architecture technology. So if you compare the performance of these both applications, the traditional architecture going to win.
Yes, sir.
Got the point?
Yes, sir. Reusability will be the thing. Means.
No, it is the major factor why SOA comes into picture. That is interoperability, because you are not going to develop a well-developed huge application without using the different services. Suppose you want to develop a smart home feature. You need to access the APIs of Alexa or Google speech, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So you are if you want to develop such a huge application or want to develop a unique want to realize your unique ideas, so it is not possible to develop that huge application or implement your unique ideas in a single language. You want machine learning in your model machine learning in your machine learning model in your project. So you must go implement those machine learning models in Python or Python, and you are using all the application services using the Java. So writing a machine learning model in Java is a very complex one. So that in that cases or use case scenarios, SOA comes into picture, because you want to access different kinds of services, and different kinds of services may be provided by different kinds of vendors and written in different kinds of different programming languages, right? So here the distributed traditional architecture going to fail. Everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is how the traditional internet distributed architecture going to work. Here is the proxy and stubs. It is going to call with their RPC. We are not going to deal with this because we have already seen the architecture of SOA in our lab 1. So for the knowledge purpose, you can go through this, but we are not going to use this or not required and many. So in case of SOA, the messaging framework supports a wide range of message exchange patterns. These message exchange patterns we are going to see. We are going to deal with this in our chapter number 5. We have a great discussion over there how the different messaging exchange patterns are used in to develop a particular architecture. We will start with the from scratch in that topic. So these all topics going to repeated in any way in our upcoming chapters. So distributed now includes XML. See, now the distributed internet architecture also includes the XML data representation. These all the slides only describes the differences, right? It's not going to be asked in your interviews how this traditional distributed internet architecture is used today. No, because the latest architecture is the SOA, but it gives a overview how this SOA is different from traditional internet distributed architecture. So you can go through this on your own. I've already discussed some of the points, the important points. So in distributed internet architecture, it has also included the XML data representation, and XML web services are optional for the distributed internet architecture, but is not. But in case of SOA, it is compulsory. So in distributed internet architecture, we have now XML data representation also, but it is not mandatory. It is optional. You can use it or you can leave it. So, but in case of SOA, it is mandatory. Without XML and web services, you cannot going to your project cannot going to survive in SOA. So, if you talk about the security aspect, when application logic crosses physical boundaries, security becomes difficult. Traditional security architecture incorporate delegation and impersonation as well as encryptions. Traditional security architectures incorporate delegation, impersonation, and the encryption. SOA depart from this model by relying heavily on WS security. So one of the extension for security part in SOA projects, what is that? That is WS security. So in chapter number 6, we are going to deal with this. What is WS security? So in SOA, if you are using SOAP messages, then it provides security on your message level security and maybe message level, and the one is what was the name? I'm forgetting. Two level security is provided by SOAP messages. One is message level security, and another one is I'm forgetting the name. So in SOAP messages carry headers where security logic can be stored. So we have already talked about how the XML message is converted into SOAP messages. We are going to add some headers. Why so much of headers? Suppose you want to embed some security features in your SOAP messages, right? So in those cases, you need some extra headers to define that this message is carrying some credentials. So it needs to be secured. No one in the process of going to actual receiver, no one going to see that those credentials in your SOAP message stored in your SOAP message. So if we are talking about administration, maintaining component-based application involves, the first thing is keeping track of individual components, tracing local and remote communication problems, monitoring server resource demands, standard database administration tasks. These all are These all are theoretical points. In case of if you are talking about the aspect of administration, aspect of the SOA or traditional distributed architecture, these all are the points. In case of traditional distributed architecture, introduces the web server and its physical environment. SOA also requires additional runtime administration, problems with the messaging frameworks, and additional administration of public and private registry of the services. Those topics which are related to SOA, anyhow we are going to deal with this in upcoming lectures, because each of these WS star extension are in our upcoming. There is administration component wrapper. Anyone wants to explain this? Just component wrapper. What is the meaning of component? What is the meaning of service, web service here? Anyone? Already talked about this. What is component and what is web service? See, a simple function can be called as web service and can be called as component. But in case of DCOM model, it is known as component. In case of SOA architecture, it is known as web service, right? In case of traditional distributed architecture, all these components must be written in a single language. In case of SOA architecture, these web services can be written in different kinds of languages. So these are so if you are transiting from traditional distributed architecture to SOA architecture, you will see this web service as a component wrapper, right? Nothing going to be changed. You are going to see that simple function, that simple component wrapper, we are simply wrapping the component as a web service, encapsulating that component as a web service. So these are some differences between the service oriented and the object oriented. So service in SOA based, and what is the difference between object oriented based? So in SOA based, the services are loosely coupled, but in case of object oriented, the objects are tightly coupled. So SOA encourages to be coarse grained interface. We have already talked about what is fine grained and coarse grained, right? So in case of object oriented, it promotes fine grained interface. In case of SOA based, processing logic varies significantly, right? But in case of object oriented, objects are smaller and more specific. Sorry. So in case of SOA based, it creates activity that is agnostic in nature. Agnostic means that can be usable in different application, means simply talking about the reusability part. So in case of object oriented, binding processing logic with the data, that is the class. Processing logic, if you are binding the processing logic with the data, that is simply known as class. In SOA based, it is stateless, and in case of object oriented programming, it is called stateful, because the objects must have data. We have already talked about what is the difference between stateless and the stateful. If we add memory in stateless, it becomes stateful. So here the data part represents the memory. So in case of objects, we have data. So this is simply a memory. So this property of objects make it stateful units. Any question till this point?
अच्छा अमरनाथ, इसका पहले वाला जस्ट प्रीवियस स्लाइड को जाओ तो, ये जो ऑब्जेक्ट ओरिएंटेड एंड SOA का प्रीवियस, जस्ट SOA का प्रीवियस, हाँ ये एक्सप्लेन किया ना, हाँ ये मैं जानना चाहता हूँ. So all have understood, yeah, this how this wrapper means कुछ cover, wrapper जो किताब में wrapper हम लोग लगाते हैं, how it helps these wrapper services, how it helps in distributed application. We'll have a total discussion on these wrapper services after this lab class. Next time, sometimes we'll have a कुछ रैपर सर्विसेज के कुछ असाइनमेंट अमरनाथ अभिषेक दे दो, ठीक है अभिषेक? हाँ, कुछ अच्छी पेपर कुछ दे दो, लोग डिस्कस करेंगे रैपर सर्विसेज, वो जानना जरूरी है, इट इज नेसेसरी. ओके, we'll talk a lot on.
सर अभी मैं बता देता हूँ कुछ उस पे सर.
नहीं अभी नहीं, उन लोग को तुम किसी एक रैंडम कोई एक लड़का को भेज दो वो क्लास में. हम लोग अभी 5:30 हो गया, छोड़ दो, छुजू करेंगे, पानी पियेंगे, छोड़ दो. और कल क्लास में क्या करोगे लैब में 9 बजे?
सर ओरेकल स्वासूट पे है सर कुछ लैब.
क्या ओरेकल स्वासूट पे क्या?
सर उसमें सर हम लोगों ने सर रिजर्वेशन वाला एक दे रखा है सर टास्क, उसको
अच्छा.
पहले करना है. और 2 पहले का जो टास्क रह गया इंस्टॉलेशन से, वो इंस्टॉल नहीं हुआ था पिछले लैब में, तो
अच्छा.
बोला था इंस्टॉल करके आने को, तो उसके बाद उसमें करेंगे. 2 पहले से हम लोग जो पेज पर नहीं सर किए हुए थे हम लोग ने.
अच्छा
उसको हम लोग
पेज पर.
यस सर, पहले हम लोग पेन और पेपर पे किए थे, अब हम लोग उसको ओरेकल स्वासूट पे करेंगे.
अच्छा ओके, करो. अभिषेक भैया बहुत प्रैक्टिकल पर्सन है, आप उनका एडवांटेज लो. यू आस्क हिम 100 क्वेश्चंस, he will study and help you to explain. He has the real interest. आप लोग काफी नसीब वाले हो कि आप लोग को इस तरह का भैया एक मिला है जो कि आपसे ज्यादा इंटरेस्ट ले रहा है आपको सही चीज बताने के लिए. आप रैपर सर्विसेज के बारे में 10 क्वेश्चन पूछोगे तो ये आपको 20 पॉइंट बताएंगे. तो आपको जिम्मेवारी है 10 क्वेश्चन पूछना. इट इज योर रिक्वायरमेंट. आपकी जरूरतें दिखलाई अगर दी कि 10 क्वेश्चन में रैपर का ऊपर पूछूं, तो ये बढ़िया ढूंढ ढांड के वेरी एप्लीकेशन ओरिएंटेड 20 पॉइंट आपको बताएंगे. तो आप उनसे जितना ही possible you take the advantage of his interest. Okay take the attendance. and बहुत कम ही लड़के, शायद 15 स्टूडेंट प्रेजेंट है हम लोग का टोटल. एक विद्यासागर कोई ज्वाइन किया है क्या? एनीबॉडी हैज एनी इंफॉर्मेशन अबाउट विद्यासागर?
सर वो कॉल करके बोला था.
टेक्स्टेड मी.
अच्छा, वो बंदा ने सॉफ्टवेयर आर्किटेक्चर क्लास अटेंड नहीं किया. कैसे ये सपना देख रहा है कि स्वा में ज्वाइन करेगा और शुरू से ज्वाइन नहीं किया. मेरे को पता नहीं चल रहा है क्या उसकी प्लान क्या है. व्हाट इज इज प्लान? इट डिडंट अटेंड सॉफ्टवेयर आर्किटेक्चर. डिस्ट्रीब्यूटेड आर्किटेक्चर के कॉन्सेप्ट उसको पता नहीं, लेयर्ड आर्किटेक्चर पता नहीं, जो प्रीवियस सब्जेक्ट है वो पढ़ा नहीं है. कैसे इस सब्जेक्ट में ज्वाइन किया पता नहीं. आई डोंट नो. मैं एचओडी से बात करके, वो भी मेरे को मैसेज दिया है, मेल दिया है कि सर मैं ज्वाइन करना चाहता हूँ. अभी क्या मेल दे रहा है? हम लोग का तो क्लास शुरू हो गया है कब? दिसंबर 14 से. पता नहीं क्या, मैंने हाउ केयरलेस द बॉय इज. आई डोंट नो.
सर उसका कहना यह है कि सर वो उसका एडमिशन CS3 में हुआ था, लेकिन वो दूसरे क्लास में, मतलब दूसरे सब्जेक्ट्स में इनरोल हो गया, तो वहीं पर करने लगा, उसको पता नहीं लगा. तो फिर इस सेमेस्टर में सही से किया है, तो फिर ऐसा कुछ बोल रहा है सर.
अच्छा उसका जरा नंबर मेरे पास भेज दो तो थोड़ा. उसको नहीं तो बोलो कि मेरे से बात करेगा कभी रात को, ठीक है?
ओके.
कल सुबह मेरे को बात करेगा 9 बजे, ठीक है?
ओके सर.
उसको बोल दो. अच्छा ठीक है. अच्छा ठीक है. We are meeting again tomorrow 9 o'clock. Till then, bye. Bye. Attendance ले लो.
ओके सर.
Okay. Till then, bye.
See, what if we